You're living in West and you are actually viewing this point on both the sides.
There is no society where Kam, Arth, Dharma and Moksha are absent.
People read it but nobody implements it in their life.
Most people don't know what it is, but it's at the end of every chapter. And at the end of every chapter, Bhagwan Shri Krishna, he says, Iti Yog Shastre.
Ma Kali, Ma Durga, Ma Saraswati.
Jai.
All these figures are very powerful. What's your perspective on that?
I have spent many years doing the Durga Chalisa with a great deal of determination.
We are worshipping the female, the femininity with so much respect, and especially on the other side, a person who is sitting on this position, he's actually framing these sentences or framing his words like this.
Go ahead and do what you think is right, and if it's actually adharmic, then the whole of the Brahmand will teach you, your karma will come back and teach.
Any scripture says something about that how should we lead our life, especially a women, ideology of how women should live their life.
We are seeing the individual being elevated as the highest form. Only a short period ago, that level of individuality was actually called selfishness.
Hello and welcome to TOI Mantra. I am Bhavna Sharma. So today we are talking about a very special subject, Sanatan Dharma, and we have a very special guest with us, Pandit Satish K Sharma, who is a scholar of dharmic traditions. Pandit ji, a very warm welcome and namaste.
Pranam ji, namaskar, Jai Shri Ram to you, Bhavna ji. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you.
Jai Shri Ram. It's a pleasure for us to have you with us on this show. So, what I have been noticing that you have been so much vocal for Sanatan Dharma in UK and globally as well. I want to understand, and I want our listeners also to understand this, that what is your viewpoint on Sanatan Dharma in recent times, beyond any interpretation and media times?
It's a great question to start with. So firstly, Sanatan means that it has no beginning and it has no end. So the Dharma Vidya that we have is applicable to all times and all places. If you follow it, it gives you the highest of Anand, it gives you the minimum of suffering, it leads to a state of incredible tranquility. It opens doorways for darshanas and for answers to the biggest questions that human beings have ever asked.
So, as I've been seeing that you have also been associated with IT and with technology as well. So, what do you think that in recent times, or if we see that in this era, in this technology era, how do you see that this Sanatan is actually helping us in growing or in evolving?
Well, it's taken Sanatanis a little bit of time to get used to the speed with which technology has moved forward. But I remember that when the internet was first created, it was created for military purposes. The people who created it never thought that families of Sanatanis would be piping the Hanuman Chalisa and Sundarkand and all sorts of incredible pieces of intelligence and wisdom into the internet. Now we have the appearance of what they call artificial intelligence, and soon there will be synthetic intelligence. In the same way, our responsibility is to use the technology that's available to actually restore harmony, to restore a sense of connectedness between human beings and to the planet.
So when we talk about the harmony and the peace globally as well, and when especially we are witnessing global wars across the world, across the countries. So how do you see it as how much Sanatan and how much our Hindu traditions and values are helping us, I mean, when we try to subside all these things globally?
Yeah, there are problems that are occurring now, which we have known about for millions of years, if not thousands of years. We have known more than anybody else what it is to be a human being. Our study first was ye kya hai? What am I? And so once we navigated the way in which the human being was created, Manomaya Kosh, Pranmaya Kosh, Vigyanmaya Kosh, Anandmaya Kosh, we understood what it is to be a human being. And then we looked at the outside world. So we put our own house in order and were able to go into the outside world and really enjoy the magnificent Brahmanda in this creation that has been created. What we are facing now, though, is human beings in the Western world who don't know what they are. They do not know how to manage the mind. They do not know how to live with the incredible bodies that they've been gifted with. And a consequence of it is suffering. They are stuck in the pursuit of Kam in adharmic means. They are stuck in the pursuit of Artha without a dharmic compass. And the consequence of that is suffering.
So, I mean, you have mentioned other things as well, but when we talk about in the recent times that Sanatan or Adhyatma, don't you think it's being revived or politically hijacked? Especially I'm talking about the Indian perspective. What do you see? Because you're living in West and you are actually viewing this point on both the sides. So what's your viewpoint on that?
Well, actually, our dharmic framework is all-encompassing. There is no society where Kam, Arth, Dharma, and Moksha are absent. They're actually a wonderful progression, and we have got the journey mapped out with incredible detail. The West doesn't have this template. Either they are stuck in thinking that if I have the maximum Kam, sab kuch mil jayega, sab kuch ho jayega. Or if I can gather to myself the maximum Artha, then I can build my palaces. But those don't lead to happiness, they don't lead to contentment, and they don't lead to Anand. They're temporary frameworks. So they have a civilizational arc. In the West, there is a civilizational arc which is only 50% completed. They are still stuck in the first of the two Purusharth. So our teachings are actually the teachings they desperately need. When a person is stuck in the pursuit of Kam, always there is mental turmoil. All of the fears, all of the rag, dvesh, all of those phenomena plague a person. I was teaching and doing some work in the US, and one of my doctor friends there, he said last year we had 120,000 young people under the age of 25 who committed suicide. And yet the US has the highest GDP. It has the most doctors. It has supposedly the most qualified lawyers, accountants, and indeed the highest percentage of psychiatrists that the world has ever seen. And yet there is an incredible sense of loss, of unhappiness, of fear.
So you've been talking about Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moksh as well. And the people, I think in the West also, they have also been taught the Bhagavad Gita lessons also. आपके हिसाब से अगर हम भगवद गीता की प्रैक्टिसेस की बात करें, and especially because people read it but nobody implements it in their life. What's your viewpoint on that? Because when we try to implement it, because पता हर किसी को होता है, लेकिन करता वही है जिसको करना होता है. What's your viewpoint on that, especially counting on Bhagavad Gita?
Well, Kali Yuga, the Yuga that we are in, it started with Gita Upadesh. Bhagwan Shri Krishna Ji, he gave us the Bhagavad Gita. But there are many people who have read the Bhagavad Gita without doing the sadhana of the Bhagavad Gita. Most people don't know that the one shloka, which is repeated again and again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, so it must be important. Most people don't know what it is, but it's at the end of every chapter. And at the end of every chapter, Bhagwan Shri Krishna, he says, Iti Yog Shastre. This is a yoga bhyas scripture. And so it must be undertaken as a sadhana. It's not something like a Harry Potter book where you can read it and understand it and you're transformed. The Bhagavad Gita is a text, a yoga bhyas scripture for transformation. It's not for education. And so it must be approached as a sadhana, and like all sadhanas, it takes a lot of abhyasa. And the more you read it, the more it will reveal itself to you. And gradually, suddenly, your mind, your feelings, your thinking apparatus will all transform. It is a text of transformation. The Arjuna in chapter 1 is not the Arjuna in chapter 18. And so if you are reading it and diving into it and contemplating it. And if you're lucky enough to be introduced to a yogi or a guru who has done the sadhana of the Bhagavad Gita, then you will be transformed. Bhay will disappear, confusion will disappear, manobal will manifest, and you will start to see the world in a totally different way. You will not only see the Kurukshetra, but you will also see the Dharmakshetra.
So the more you read it, and the more transformation will happen inside you, right?
Absolutely. All of our scriptures are transformative. When we do the Hanuman Chalisa, many people do it as a bhajan. But for me, the most important line in the Hanuman Chalisa is Kije Nath Hirday Ma Dera. It's an invocation to Hanumanji to transform you and take residence in your Hirdayam. So you become an incarnation of Sri Hanumanji. That's a transformation. And so if the transformation doesn't happen, then it's still running around in your head. And so you need to do more abhyasa and more sadhana.
We are actually discussing the deities like Krishna. We have discussed about Krishna and Hanumanji. But when we talk about the feminine side, the feminine figure, Ma Kali, Ma Durga, Ma Saraswati,
Jai.
all these figures are very powerful. What's your perspective on that?
I agree with you entirely. I have spent many years doing the Durga Chalisa with a great deal of determination. And there is no doubt at the end of the Durga Chalisa, you feel that Ma has taken presence inside of you. She has given you more energy and more pran shakti than when you started your Durga Chalisa. And at the end of it, you have the courage, the words and the bhavna, the sentiment, the sounds, the rhythm, everything. They help to reharmonize all of your koshas and all of your being. And there is no doubt of it, Pran Shakti is the divine feminine. And without the divine feminine, the divine masculine is actually inactive. And so without it, it's very difficult to function fully. And Bharat's responsibility in the world is really to restore Dharma Vidya and to restore harmony across the planet. This is the responsibility of us. We're the only ones who have this Vidya. We're the only ones who know how to take a broken heart, a broken body, and a broken mind, and to help heal them and make them whole again. And so we have a huge responsibility and a great opportunity.
So before, sir, I will jump on to the next question. I have a very, I want your viewpoint on this question as well. So there is a Kathavachak in India whose name is Aniruddhacharya Maharaj. Recently, he commented on female actions or, in the Indian society, what the female sector is doing, which actually got so much of backlash. I might be knowing that you must have heard about it. What's your viewpoint on that? Yes, I want to know what's your viewpoint on that, because when we are worshipping the female, the femininity with so much respect, and especially on the other side, a person who is sitting on this position, he's actually framing these sentences or framing his words like this. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, firstly, I'm a great believer in the Natya Shastra, which says that everybody has the highest level of freedom of expression. And we also have the choice to listen to what somebody is saying or to reject it. Our philosophy of karma says quite happily, you go ahead and do what you think is right. And if it's actually adharmic, then the whole of the Brahmand will teach you. Your karma will come back and teach you. And so from my point of view, he is completely entitled to express his opinion. And nobody has to accept it. When I do talks in interfaith, the first thing I say to people is that the world calls Hindus kufar and infidel. So whatever I'm going to say, you have no need to believe it. I don't need you to believe it whatsoever. And so when an acharya puts a proposition in front of people, if they are mature, they will have the opportunity to say to themselves, well, I don't believe that at this time, but other people do. They are entitled to their opinion. And it may be that I have got things to learn myself. It may be that my marg has got to teach me things, but that's my karma. And that is the sthiti, this is the uniqueness of the Sanatani tradition. We don't require everybody to conform to anything uniformly. Having said that, the acharyas are custodians of a civilization. Their job is to look like the lookout on the Titanic, a man called Fleet. His job was to look far ahead of the Titanic and to see whether there were obstacles. Our acharyas look far ahead of our civilization, and their intention and their purpose is to say to us, these are the probable outcomes of your actions, and I'm sharing them with you. Your individual desires may be detrimental to the greater Samaj. And also bear in mind, we have the understanding of Punarjanma. And so it may well be that something is presented to you for which you will benefit and everybody else will benefit in Janmas to come. So we have acharyas, and we should be very appreciative of the fact that they have the courage to say, this is what my sadhana, my study of ancient scriptures, my study of the Brahmand has revealed to me, and I'm sharing it with you. Whether you take it or leave it is your karma.
I think everybody has, this is what you have mentioned, that everybody has the freedom of speech and especially to live also.
Yeah.
And especially in the West, अगर हम West की बात करें, Western countries की बात करें, तो there I think everybody has the liberty to do anything and everything. How do we see it from the angle or from the perspective of dharma, since you are a scholar of dharmic traditions? So how do we see it from that angle? Is there any
Wonderful.
specific criteria or any scripture says something about that how should we lead our life, especially a women? And I'm not pointing on that particular statement, but yes, I'm just talking about the ideology of how women should live their life.
Well, I think, thank you for the invitation to a question which could be a Chakraviewer in its own right. I appreciate the skill with which you presented that. But I think we can derive a great deal of wisdom from the guidance of people who studied a whole of life. You know, I recall when I was in my teens, I was a different person. I had a different understanding. I had a different vision. I never had any expectation that Dharm Vidya and Dharm Gurus would take me, beat me up, and dust me down and create a better person. The whole of life journey teaches many things. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for every young person to step back and try and look at the whole of their life. Ki aage kya hone wala hai? You know, there is a time when we're going to be vulnerable. There is a time when we're going to need protection. There is a time when we're going to need community. There is a time when we're going to need to learn in difficult times from the experiences of elders and of other people who have walked the journey that we're planning to walk. The person who thinks that they can go from the beginning of life to the end of life on their own will learn from their own mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes can be irrecoverable. They can be unbelievably painful. In the West, we are seeing the individual being elevated as the highest form. Only a short period ago, that level of individuality was actually called selfishness. And now it's been transformed into something elevated and put like a deity on an altar. And it's not true, it's not real. We have seen selfishness lead to a breakdown in family. We have seen selfishness lead to a breakdown in relationships. We have seen it create impatience, intolerance, and all of those things that destroy the most enjoyable things about human life. When you bring children into this world, you can't do it on your own. It's very, very tough. Ask the mothers who are single mothers in the West whether their decisions have led them to long-term happiness. You know, we have a saying that either you can learn from your own mistakes, but it's better to learn from the mistakes of other people and see what has happened to them and then try and incorporate them in your journey. And ultimately, the highest journey is possible when you have referred to the people who have made the most journeys. And we have got so much Vidya in our Shastra, in our Puranas, in our scriptures. And the Yoga Vishishta is one of my favorite scriptures. The Ramayana, Maryada Purushottam, where we are taught how to navigate a social set of relationships to the highest benefit. Everybody has the
That's love.
opportunity to turn to those, to learn from them. But again,
Mhm.
we have infinity at our disposal. You have many lifetimes to come. And if you want to stumble by making mistakes and learn only from mistakes, you have the freedom to do so.
So you have talked about selfishness, and these days selfishness is also called as self-love, or maybe it has been transformed to self-love. Do you think that is that the reason for breaking these relationships, or probably in India also, recent times relationships are breaking at that point where people are more aware, or they are becoming more aware of self-love, or what do you call as selfishness?
Yeah, and this thing about self-love is an interesting one. We
Hmm.
have a notion of something called samskara.
Yeah.
And the question I'd ask everyone to consider, when Sanatanis, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, everybody who's a member of the Sanatani tree, flowers of
Hmm.
this Sanatani tree, go abroad, they don't study the laws of those countries. They don't study how are relationships being made here. The last 2 or 3 generations have been the most successful generations, even in the West. If you have a look at the contribution and the performance of the Sanatani family in the United Kingdom and the
Hmm.
United States, our children, ourselves, we have the least lack of health. We have the most in terms of security and safety of assets and well-being. We have the highest level of education amongst our children. We have the
Hmm.
lowest divorce rates, and we have the highest contribution to society. Now, isn't
And
that
people.
a pinnacle of society? And the
Hmm.
reason is samskaras. It's the
Yeah.
value systems that our Sanatani traditions give to us when we are young and when we are children and when we
Hmm.
receive them at a very early age. Now, I would say those samskaras have proven themselves in
Hmm.
difficult places. The United Kingdom, when I came here in the 60s, I was born in Punjab in a little village and came here in
Okay.
the 60s. I've been here almost 60 years. And the United Kingdom was not a place of pleasantness. It was a hostile place. It was an aggressive place. And
Hmm.
yet, even in hostility, our community has thrived and prospered. And that's because of Sanatani Sanskaras, which were formed over hundreds and hundreds of years. So do an empirical experiment. Sadhana means experiment.
Hmm.
Sadhana is nothing except performing an experiment with your own life. And so each person should actually explore with their own lives and bear the consequences and be responsible for bearing the consequences. I think
Hmm.
what they would find is a patient approach along the basis of Sanatani Sanskaras will actually give them the longest enduring positions of safety, security, and indeed Anand as well as Prem.
So when we talk about endurance, when we talk about safety and security, and especially the term you use, that sanskar is the baseline of Sanatan Dharma. Don't
Yeah.
you think in India, sanskars are vanishing from the relationships? That is the reason maybe that relationships are breaking up, and in the society we are seeing it as a you know a sort of turmoil, because we are giving a different terms to these relationships. Sometimes we are calling it in a live-in relationship,
Yeah.
or situationships. The new terms are coming up. Are they are there repercussions of probably the when sanskars are vanishing from the society?
When you employ somebody to do decorative work, interior design in your home, it's always worth having a look at the
Hmm.
home that that person has built for themselves.
Hmm.
Now, if we want to follow these
Hmm.
terms and these relationships, it's worth looking at the origin of them. Let's go back
Hmm.
to the source nations and see what they have actually understood and what benefits they have received. It would be foolish to risk one's whole life journey on the basis of ideologies and experimentation without looking at the source of the people who have originated those ideologies. And what you will find is a great deal of suffering. You will find elderly people on their own during their declining years, you will find such an amount of fear and worry amongst people who themselves have had polygamous relationships in their adolescent years. They become incapable of sustaining a long-term relationships. And from our perspective, we say that grihast is actually the highest form of sadhana. A progression on the adhyatmic journey is unbelievably wonderful and deep in the most challenging of circumstances. And grihastashram is probably where the diamond is polished the most. I remember my grandfather saying to me, he described grihastashram as the pouch in which diamonds are polished by rubbing against each other. And the friction that's caused in that sort of grihast situation results in the most sparkling of human beings. And so people, if they wish to experiment with these ways of living, they're experimenting, and I wouldn't recommend it. It will have a detrimental effect on their bodies, on their minds, and on their hearts. It may be short-term sensory gratification, but in the medium to long term, it will only lead to suffering, fear, and illness as well, mental as well as physical.
So you have mentioned the term grahastashram. So grahastashram is a very typical word when we talk about sadhana, because when a sadhak is living his life, it is meant to be that he should live, very far from grahasthashram. Otherwise, he cannot or she cannot complete his or her sadhana. How right is that to say this? Because when we talk about these scriptures, either Bhagavad Gita, what Bhagavad Gita says about it?
Bhavnaji, that again is a wonderful question. I'm so pleased that the questions you're asking are so important and so necessary. Firstly, all of the rishis had live-in relationships, as they would be called. They were cohabiting with members of the fairer and opposite sex.
But people have been misleading probably with these.
Oh, they have.
Yeah.
Now, there was a time when I was doing my sadhana a long time ago. My children were young. And I remember meeting a guru who was a sannyasi. And I asked him, Gurudev, is it the right thing for me to be preparing and contemplating sannyas and leaving the world? And he said, Pandit ji, agar aapke man mein ye sawal hai, then that's the wrong answer for you. He said, people like me from an early age, i.e. people like him from an early age, he said, we had absolutely no comfort, we had no peace unless we left. And so a lifetime will come when you will be born, and from the earliest age, you will be driven to leave Samaj. You won't need to be able to contribute to society by creating a family, by creating wealth so that everybody else can also enjoy it. And so this necessity to go and take sannyas, if you take it prematurely, it will come back and hit you hard. We also have the combination of the three debts, the rin. We have the debt of a body. If we have a healthy body that we can do sannyas in, that we can do sadhana in, then we have to repay that, because your healthy body is actually the creation and the outcome of many generations of people in your family. What they have eaten, the samskaras that they have actually preserved, what the sadhana they have performed in their bodies has contributed. In our tradition, we say 7 generations are impacted upon by the activities that we perform. And so you have a debt to your ancestors. You also have a debt to the Samaj, which allows you to do sadhana, which allows you to be safely educated, which allows you to enjoy your bachpana, your childhood, with laughter and with happiness. All of those things we have to repay. And if we repay them, what happens is our sadhana is happening automatically. You can happily achieve the highest fruits of sadhana whilst staying in a grihast environment. We have many examples. Raja Janak, Sita Devi's father, he was an enlightened being, and yet he stayed within the Samaj and he performed his kingly duties. And so there is no requirement for you to abandon grihastashram in order to accelerate the processes of sadhana. In fact, I would say that it is an abandonment of responsibility. I have this conversation with many monks, in fact. And the last time I had this conversation was with a Buddhist monk, and I said to him, "You're expecting to be reincarnated in your next birth." And he said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "Well, you have a wonderful body. Aren't you taking advantage of somebody else's sadhana? You're relying on them to create bodies for you guys to come back so that you can continue. Isn't that a betrayal?" And he thought about it and he said, "Panditi, I have no answer for that. I will think about it." In my tradition, I've been blessed with teachings which said that you have to perform sadhana within a grihastha ashram, satisfy all of the rin, all of the debts, and you will find your sadhana will flourish.
I think a beautiful explanation from your side, and I'm truly satisfied with this. But I have one more question on this, that when we talk about Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moksh, all these things, I'm not talking about moksha because that's a big term to talk about. But when we talk about these evil forces, I mean Kam, Krodh, Lobh, how difficult is that to live in the society and get rid of these evil forces, of what we probably call in the society that the negative forces? How to get rid of all these things?
Again, a wonderful question. So, putting the Purusharth and Moksha to one side and just looking at Kam, Krodh, and Lobh and so on, they're not evil. We have never had the concept of good and bad, if you can imagine that. We have had the concept of dharma and adharma, which are totally different things. Now, if Kam didn't exist, then samsara would grind to a halt. Kam is built into our bodies. Kam is the desire-based motivating force which keeps propelling us forward. We are the only creature in all of the whole of the Brahmand who have got the capacity to control Kam and Krodh. All of the other creatures, they're driven by nature. If you have a look, animals have seasons, don't they? They reproduce and engage because they can't control Kam. It's not built into them. But we have actually got the capacity to enjoy Kam, to enjoy the anand that Kam provides, to experience it, but not be dominated by it. And that's the key. If you can engage in Kam without being dominated by it, then it's unbelievably powerful and it's a great sadhana. Krodh is something which arises out of some imbalances in our samskaras. And doing sadhana will also help move beyond Krodh. All of these can be dealt with even by the normal journey through Grihastha. And I often say to people that children are our children are our greatest gurus and our greatest teachers of sadhana. All of the things that we grow up with before we have children. When you have children, suddenly your priorities change. You are taught patience. When you're having to wake up at 4 a.m., 2 a.m. to look after a tiny little baby who you love so much, suddenly you learn how to master things like
But
Krodh.
patience is, again, I think patience is also a form of sadhana, I think. And when we're talking about Krodh, right? So once I've heard it, or somewhere I have read it, that Krodh is a form of an emotion that only lasts for few seconds in our body. It's all scientific. So when we are actually exaggerating it, we are don't you think that we are just going away from the mode of this sadhana, or we are too much dominated of what we call as Krodh or Lobh?
All of these things that we give our freedom to, our enjoyment to, our future to, these forces which undermine our journey through life, they're actually not difficult to overcome. Growth is vital when you are faced with an existential threat. If something is attacking you, we have built into us the capacity to release, to unleash all of our physical form, the forces and energy within us in a split second. And growth is necessary to do that. But when Krodh is unleashed without discipline, then it becomes adharmic. And so the question really is not what's wrong with Krodh. The question is, can you manage it or can you control it? Does it serve you or do you serve it? In a moment, it can destroy the whole of your existence. And there are many, many examples in the Mahabharata, in the Ramayana, of instances where people haven't been able to control it, and it's suddenly, or even in football, there was a French footballer, Zinedine Zidane, who lost control of his anger in a World Cup final and attacked one of the members on the other side, and France lost their World Cup chances in the final. So it's worth investing a little bit of time in learning about oneself and learning to manage these gifts. Everything is a gift so long as it serves you and you don't serve it.
So I think it's a beautiful conversation with you, and I think I'm truly satisfied with whatever you said, because it's very meaningful.
Thank you, Bhavnaji.
I think before we end this conversation, I want you to just tell me very briefly that what should we all do, because when we're talking about with all, all these words, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moksha especially, what should we do in recent times, being a sadhak or not being a sadhak, to get rid of these negative emotions? I would call it as a negative emotion, although you are saying that these are just 2 points of a coin, 2 sides of a coin, but still people call it as a negative emotion. So how to just stay away or not being dominated by it?
I think there are many small pieces, small jigsaw piece puzzles in this particular question. There is no doubt any person who wants to enjoy life doesn't want to become the victim of their own emotional instability. That's a reasonable proposition. So it's worth investing in. If you're putting in so much time to study, to acquire professional status, to become influential, you don't want to risk it all disappearing in a moment. So why not study this aspect as well and devote a little bit of time to it? Who is there who doesn't want a fruitful, loving relationship? And you don't want to risk destroying a beautiful relationship, one in which you were completely consumed. Aapka janam to taro mein tha, and you have been created just to come down on earth to match with me. Those wonderful feelings that we have in your youth, you don't want to destroy those relations. Unthought, uncontrolled anger. And so it's worth investing time in dealing with these. And we have got 1,000 ways in which people can deal with these issues. A jnani, somebody who's got an intellectual mind, may get the answers in the Ramayana, studying it, may get them in the Gita, studying it. Somebody who's more physically attuned, yoga abhyas, hatha yoga is a wonderful thing. It teaches you things about your body and it stabilizes your body. And I'm going to share with you one secret in answer to your last wonderful question. And that secret is that if a child starts to perform yoga abhyas before adolescence, adolescence is transformed. Because what yoga abhyas does is it harmonizes the hormonal system. And so you can pass through the stage where all of your hormones are building a fully adult body without all of the trauma and the upsets and the emotional ups and downs that are associated with adolescence. I'm blessed with 3 beautiful children, and they were all doing yoga abhyas, hatha yoga with me right the way through their years, and we never had adolescent children. So I always say to parents, when your children are at the age of 8, 9, 10, start them to doing gentle hatha yoga practices, yoga abhyas practices, and it will give them an incredible harmony in their body, and they will navigate adolescence without the emotional turmoil.
Thank you so much, Panditji. And it was a extremely pleasure to have you on this show. I really enjoyed a lot with this conversation with you. And thank you so much for being with us.
Jai Shri Ram and Pranam Namaskar and Om to all of your darshakas.
Thank you so much.